In his world of progress and technology, man convinces himself that there's nothing out there, nothing moving in the shadows beyond the arc of his peripheral vision, nothing in the light taking account of his deeds and actions. In this podcast, we will discuss the paranormal, hauntings, spirituality, all things between the darkness and the light, angels, demons, the universe within, and the universe without. I'm Paul James Caiden, and this is The Spirit Side. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. I'm Paul James Caiden, and on today's show, we're going to be talking about psychedelics for spiritual awakening. Now, I'm sure many of you listening to this podcast are aware of the trend that's happening in our world right now with DMT and other substances where people are using them for spiritual awakening, having spiritual experiences. Well, this isn't really a new thing because a lot of native people have done this for years, where they would smoke certain herbs in a pipe or put them in a tea or a juice or ingest them and pretty much go on the trip where they would say that they would leave their bodies or cross over into the spiritual dimensions and have these experiences that would help them grow as a person, as a shaman. And this kind of thing is really making a big comeback in our world today. You don't have to look very far on the internet, on articles or videos, to find the word or the words Cambo, DMT, magic mushrooms. I mean, the hallucinogenics are all over the place, where people are talking about them and saying, no, we've been taught in the past these things are bad for us, but they're actually good for us. They have a health benefit, they have a psychological health benefit, and they can also help us to awaken spiritually and have these awesome experiences where we realize who we really are, spiritual beings. And we feel very calm. We don't fear death anymore. We're not so worried about the negative things that are playing out in our world and our society anymore. But is this for everyone? You know, the two that I really want to talk about today that are very popular, and we actually have practitioners, healing practitioners who use these substances to quote-unquote heal people. And one of them is called Cambo, Kambo. And basically what Cambo is, and a Cambo practitioner, is that it is the scrapings of a secretion of a very toxic and poisonous frog. And these secretions are collected from the frog, and the Cambo practitioner will bring you into their place of meditation, their place of administering healing. And many times what they will do is that they will burn your skin with a small piece of wood that's been held in the fire. So it's actually like burning you with a cigarette. This actually puts a deep, dark, burned impression on your skin. And you can find videos of this, and it looks quite painful because the people are wincing and, taking a deep breath. And they're not just making one or two holes. I mean, they're making several holes, anywhere between 6, 9, or more on the shoulders, on the legs, wherever they feel they want to administer the medicine or the cambo. Then what they will do once they put the burned indents in your body is that they will take the scrapings from the frog and the cambo, and they will put it in the burns, the indentations of the burns on the body. Now, what happens next is described as feeling like you're going to die. They say it just feels like the body is shutting down. You feel like you are dying. There's kind of a trip that might, go along with this. But they say at this point, the body releases a cocktail of chemicals and hormones and everything to try to keep you alive and heal you and get this poison out of your system. And so by the time you are more conscious, coming out of this state of feeling like you're going to die, pretty much what will happen is that you will, excuse my language on a spiritual podcast, but some of these practitioners have used this word verbatim. You will literally shit your pants and puke your guts out. And it's not a pleasant experience, but the people who undergo cambo treatments with a cambo practitioner say that what this does is twofold for them. And that is through the process of literally feeling like you're going to die, that when you come back from that, you don't have any fear of death anymore because you feel like you've already died and then came back to life. So all fear of death, the afterlife passing away, has been purged from your consciousness. They also say that this cleanses the body. All toxins, all parasites through the uncontrolled bowel movements and vomiting, which I guess over the next 3 or 4 days after the cambo treatment, you're still going to have some diarrhea and, some very loose bowel movements, maybe a little bit of nausea and vomiting. But they say this gets all the toxins out of the system, and after that 3 or 4 days, you just feel wonderful. You don't have any fear of death. You feel like you've already died and come back to life. All the toxins are purged out of your body, and you just feel wonderful mentally, physically, and spiritually. And they say really, if you're going to seek enlightenment through these, what they call medicines, you're best to start off with the cambo, because this prepares you and gets you ready for other medicines, other herbs, other substances that will take you higher and awaken you spiritually. And of course, one of them being DMT. DMT has a similar effect as cambo, but although it's not, from what they say, unpleasant, making you feel like you're going to die, but rather it just takes you into this trip. It is a hallucinogenic, and they say when you use it, you will literally find yourself on the other side. It pierces the veil. Your consciousness sees beyond the physical world, and you will see things and hear things and experience things that you never thought possible. Many people say that during a trip or using DMT that they've seen God, they've seen angels, they've talked to these serpent beings who were very friendly, the ancient serpentine ones, who would take energetic poisons out of their bodies or out of their spiritual bodies. I mean, people say that they've seen some very incredible things while using DMT, and when they come back, even though the trip, I'll call it, only lasted 2 minutes, 5 minutes, they say that they feel like they've been in this other dimension, witnessing these fantastic things for hours. And again, when they come back from that, they say they have no fear of death. They know who they are. They know that it's a spiritual universe, that they are a spiritual being, that they're one with, and the problems and stresses of this world just doesn't have the effect on them that it once did. So using these substances, or medicines as they call them, really does, they all seem to have the same goal in mind, and that's to have you kind of undergo sort of a death without dying, or projecting your consciousness into the spirit realm. You see reality, what's really out there, what life is really all about. And, it just really takes you out of the world mindset. You're much more calm, you're much more brave, you know who you are, you know where you're going, you know where you've come from, and people say that it's a very profound experience to use these substances, or again, as they call them, medicines. So what is my perspective on all this? As I like to do on the show is talk about some of these things that are happening in our world, or spiritual ideas, and then offer what I think. And my thoughts are not necessarily anyone else's thoughts, and I'm not telling anyone else in this show what they should do. Everyone is free to do as they feel that they want to or need to. So if somebody wants to experiment with these substances, that's their call. They have free will. They can make that decision. Me personally, I don't think any less of anyone or any more of anyone if that's what they choose to do, to try to find some peace in life or grow spiritually. But for me personally, I'm kind of the old spiritual metaphysical school of thought that the material world is the material world, and the spiritual world is the spiritual world. And as much as all of us like to have decorations and visuals and aids in our spiritual walk, some people like statues, whether they be angels or Buddha or Jesus or Mary or a favorite saint, candles, incense, rosaries, prayer beads. I mean, the list goes on and on of things that people will use or focus their gaze upon when they're engaged in prayer or meditation. And as physical beings, there are times that we need that because it does help us to focus. But I think there's a line that can be crossed there, and that can be what some religions call idolatry. If that statue, if that candle, if that crucifix, or whatever it might be, if that becomes kind of like a god to you. You don't feel that your prayers are effective, or that your meditation is effective, or you just can't seem to get it right without those props and those decorations. Almost like these objects have some kind of divine power or magic power or charm that helps you achieve more spiritual heights. And I think we can move that up the ladder a little bit for me with these substances that, we're using herbs and hallucinogenics and certain poisons to shock the body in such a way that it feels like it's dying or it's hallucinating. And who knows if these trips that people have on DMT, maybe they're seeing beyond the veil, maybe they're not. You know, there's no real way to prove that. You know, for myself, I look at the near-death experience. I look at the deathbed vision. I look at the experience of great mystics and saints, and what those people see, what those people encounter is much different than what the people on DMT or some other substance experience when it comes to the afterlife or seeing beyond the veil. I mean, it's quite different to see loved ones or angels or someone like Jesus or whomever, you know, coming through the light and telling you they're going to take you home, taking you into the light, into the tunnel. That's quite different than seeing all kind of psychedelic colors and serpents of fire that come to you and run throughout your spiritual body, supposedly cleaning your chakras and your spiritual energy, and seeing giant reptilians and all this kind of thing. It's kind of two very different experiences. For me, one I trust because it's more, if I may use the word, natural. If someone is having a near-death experience or a deathbed vision, they're getting ready to die and pass on, and what they say they sometimes see. Or if you are in great meditation and contemplation on the divine and the spiritual, and you have an experience that opens up to you, again, it's usually something quite different than the people on the substances experience. So that makes me a little bit leery of the process. I mean, I've never heard of anyone having a near-death experience or a deathbed vision or any such thing as this who said, well, you know, there were giant reptilians and serpents of fire, you know, that entered my soul body and were crawling around inside of me, you know, you know, this sort of thing. You know, that seems a little bizarre to me. And that's just me. Other people may feel differently about it, and that's fine. That's their call. But see, folks, I think, and again, it's just my thoughts on the situation. I think we are spiritual beings. This material world that we live in, it's not the real world. It's not even a reality per se. Some people call it the Matrix. Quantum physics is now saying that, you know, it seems we live in a simulation. None of this is real. Everything is energy and waves and particles. And now they're even saying that it seems that the universe itself has a consciousness. And I believe that consciousness is God. It is the divine spirit. And we are a part of that consciousness, a part of that spirit, a spirit. We are reflections and creations of it. So when the Bible says God created man in his image, I believe, as some believe, and many metaphysicians believe, that that's talking about the spiritual aspect of man, not necessarily the physical. And so I believe, as spiritual beings who have that divine spark within us, we have everything we need within ourselves, within our consciousness, to awaken spiritually, to rise to those new heights, to have experiences that are breathtaking and vivid. I was just meditating the other day, and I was very deep in meditation, and I found myself like I was floating through this void. It was a very deep blue color. and I kind of drifted up, and there was this angel standing on a high mountain that, it seemed like it touched the sky. And he had a blazing torch in his hand, and he was circling the torch above his head, and it looked like the sky was moving like water, ripples in the water. And I wasn't making this up. It was just happening in my meditation. And the angel looked at me and said, "This is the veil that separates the physical from the material. And it is thin and it is pliable. And man is able to pass beyond it in his consciousness. But many do not, because when they hit that ceiling, they perceive that it is solid and that they are unable to pass through it or get through it, and therefore they do not." And then that little vision was over. So that was very interesting. It was very vivid. I came out of meditation with kind of this wow feeling. I didn't need to take a drug. I didn't need to drink alcohol. I didn't need any kind of substance to induce that. It just happened naturally during my time of meditation. And sometimes things like this happen. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes I just sit in the quiet, focusing on, the divine presence, divine love, divine peace. But when you really feel that divine love, that divine peace, that's enough. Everything else is an added bonus. So I think everything we need is already within us. And I think that's the way that we are meant to have our spiritual growth, our spiritual awakening. I think if we try to cheat that process and use material substances, there can be maybe flaws, false awakenings, false experiences, because we're putting something in our body that's playing games with our nervous system, with our brain, with the chemicals in our brains, with the glands in our body and our brain, I mean, I get it. There are people who say, the pineal gland, it's the housing of the soul, it's this, it's that, and, all this kind of thing. But again, if that's true, do I need to take some kind of substance to enact that or to wake that up? Do I need to burn a hole in my skin and put poison in that hole from, a very toxic, poisonous frog, from the jungle? Again, the experiences that many people have on these substances are quite different than the experience those who that are having a near-death experience or a mystical experience in meditation or prayer or what have you. Because for me, when I've had experiences like that, it was a very peaceful feeling, a very eye-opening feeling. There is more to me. There is more to the universe. There is more to life. You come out of that just feeling energized and alive and loved and fortunate and thankful and peaceful. And yes, all the fear of death and things going on in the world are just banished because you feel like you were in the presence of something so wonderful. Now contrast that with a feeling burning a hole in your body and putting a substance in it that makes you feel like you're going to die. And then you come out of that and start, crapping your pants and throwing up in a bucket and, being violently ill. A little bit different when you weigh them in the scales. And again, that makes me wonder, is this a flawed path? Is this a flawed way to try to open up our spirituality by making the body sick, making it feel like it's going to die, playing games with, its chemicals and secretions in the brain and in the body, and making it hallucinate and see these things. Again, I'm not judging anyone. It's not my place on this podcast or in life to judge anyone. But as I look at the differences in experience and how they make people feel, I'm quite a bit skeptical of using the hallucinogenic substances to try to open up our spirituality and, raise our consciousness. Not to mention that, what if something were to go wrong? What if somebody didn't tolerate that substance? What if it ended up stopping their heart or, killing them in some way? I mean, that is possible with any of these substances that we use. I mean, never in history of any religion have we heard of, angels or gods or messengers or any kind of spirit from the light, coming down and, injecting someone with, some kind of chemical to make them more wise and more spiritual. So again, I'm very skeptical of those things, and I don't think that I would try it. My body is not very tolerant of some drugs, even prescription medications and over-the-counter medications. My body doesn't do well with them because I've never taken drugs in my life. I've never had the need for a lot of prescription medication, so some things really wreak havoc on me, and I get the side effects. So I would be concerned about putting something like that in my body, but I would also be concerned about forcing this experience to happen with this substance, because it's not an experience that's being opened up or controlled by my own spirit, my own soul, or God, or an angel, or a heavenly messenger. It's me forcing my body, forcing my brain, forcing my perception to experience or see a certain thing by putting a chemical, or in some instances, a poison in my physical body. So even intuitively for me, that just doesn't feel right. I wouldn't do it. I personally wouldn't recommend that anyone do it, but again, we all have free will, we all have our journey, and if that's something you feel you need to do or have done, that's certainly your choice. And again, I don't judge anyone for it. But certainly I think that is a good idea to go and look at the experiences of the near-death experience, the deathbed vision, the visions and out-of-body experiences of the mystics, experiences people have had in meditation or prayer, and then contrast that with the experiences people have on these hallucinogenics and see what the difference is. And then ask yourself, is one authentic? Is one not authentic? Is one real and more pure, and one is forced and possibly flawed? Because a lot of times in this world, these trends will start up, and we hear all these people saying all these wonderful things of what we should do or what we should believe, and we don't question it. We very much have become a society that just listens to what other people tell us. Well, hell, Joe Rogan tried DMT and he thought it was great, so it must be. No, do your research. Question. Find out the information for yourself. Weigh this in the balance before you take that step if this is something you're thinking of doing. It's not a bad thing to ask questions. It's not a bad thing to be different. It's not a bad thing that if everyone else is driving 100 miles an hour toward, 1,000-foot cliff drop-off, to maybe put on the brakes and say, should I be following this pack to the edge of that cliff? Now, I'm not saying that, taking these substances is like jumping off a cliff. Maybe it is. Maybe it is like jumping off of a cliff for some people. Who knows? I'm just saying, have the facts, do the research, weigh things out. I think the two experiences, what happens naturally, spiritually, from consciousness, from spirit, are very different from what's happening on when people are on these substances, and we don't see people crapping their pants, throwing up, and feeling like they're going to die. I just don't know how spiritual of an experience that is, but to each their own, I suppose. So anyway, folks, I appreciate you listening. Links are always below for my Patreon if you want to support this work, my Angel Thoughts metaphysical page if you would like an angel card reading, spiritual counseling, or anything of that nature. You're certainly welcome to go over there and, get in contact with me. My email is always below if you have any questions or something you like me to cover on a show. It's a big universe. There's a lot of things happening out there in the world. So if there's something you're curious about, something you'd like me to talk about, shoot me an email or leave a comment if you're watching this on YouTube or any of the other video platforms. And if I think it's a good subject, I will certainly cover it here on the show. So again, thank you all for listening. I'm Paul James Caiden, and I'll see you next time on the Spirit Side.